All right, welcome to lecture, everyone. This is week 10. We're going to be covering event handlers and conditionals for our programming topic. But first, some quick announcements. Homework 9 will be the last required homework, and it's due. Homework 10 is released, and it will be available as extra credit. And that will be due next week on Thursday. Or sorry, not next week. Yeah, next week, sorry. On April 18th. Lab 7 will be due next Monday, which is April 15th at 11:59. We've released the final project. Hopefully you've been getting your check-ins done for the high fidelity designs that you made. That will be due tonight. And final project is going to be officially due in 11 days on Monday, April 22nd. Also, if you're interested in applying to be a TA, please apply by tomorrow night. Yeah, thank you. Oh, interesting sound. Okay, so there's a lot that goes into kind of coding in general, and why, and it can get very complicated at times. So yeah, if you're feeling a little bit intimidated or scared, don't worry, you're not alone, and this is definitely something that is extremely challenging that a lot of people face. Yeah, here are a couple like memes from this, and people talking about it very early in the morning. But yeah, going back to, oh my gosh, going back to the subject that we were talking about last lecture, which is kind of this idea of when a user clicks or hovers over something, being a button, link, or image, then we want to add, change, or remove the HTML or CSS. So this is kind of the flexibility that we have in JavaScript. You can do any of these things or any combination of these things. But for today, we're going to mostly be focusing on the click interaction. So a quick review of what we covered last week. We have this kind of syntax here of getting an element by ID in a document. And so we do document.getElementById, and then we specify the ID we're looking for. Yeah, I guess first as a quick refresher on JavaScript, our let keyword lets us know that we can define a new variable. Menu is the name of our new variable, and the right side, whatever it is going to be defined as the value of that variable, if that makes sense. So yeah, in this case, does anyone know what menu might return? Okay, well, that's okay. Essentially, menu will return some piece of HTML code that has the ID of menu. And we can do the same thing. Basically, this will return the exact same code that we got, but it's written a little bit differently and with a different function here. So query selector is another function that we always have access to. And it is a little bit more versatile because we're not only constrained to things that have IDs, we can also use it for classes, and we can also use it for different types of tags. So yeah, this is a lot more versatile, but it does require a little bit more syntax. So we use query selector, and then we have our argument, which is menu, but it has a hashtag in front, just like the CSS selectors that we've made in the past. So yeah, this is kind of the definitive document on how you can use query selector and get element by ID or class name. Yeah, this is kind of the idea that we have within JavaScript. ID is always going to be used when you have a single element. So it will only ever return a single instance. But if we have many items that are within a class, then we can use getElementsByClassName to return us a list of all the HTML elements, or query selector. I believe you have to include query selector all when you want a list of all the menu items. So yeah, does anyone have any ideas on what menu.classList returns? This is something that we covered last week. No worries. So menu.classlist returns us a list of all the classes that are within a single element. So if a menu is defined with dark mode and blue box or whatever, then we return both of those in a list. So class list also has a couple of functions attached to it that we can use to kind of change the CSS at different times. So menu.classlist.add will allow you to, of course, add a new class onto our element. In this case, we can add dark mode, which anyone have any ideas on what it might do? I guess I kind of explained it. But yeah, it adds the class onto our menu element. Can anyone tell me similarly what remove would do in this case? Say it louder. Yeah, it'll remove the light mode class. Right. Awesome job. Awesome job. So yeah, this is kind of the concept that we're going with the DOM and event handlers. Basically, that gives us the flexibility to change the CSS at any given time. But yeah, let's get into kind of in depth on what event handlers are. I guess as a preface to that, we have a quick explanation of what the document object model is. This is not as confusing as it might seem. It's basically just our HTML represented in a JavaScript format. So we have our HTML page. As soon as it loads, JavaScript creates its own kind of representation of this, all with objects, which we learned last week. And so each of these objects represents a single HTML tag. Any questions with the DOM? Okay, great. So yeah, we have documents.getElements by class name, which I believe, just introduced. And this will allow you to get all of the elements that contain the class name of food. So yeah, what we're saying is that from our document object model, we're getting all the elements with the class name food. In the same kind of situation, if we have get element by ID of food list, we're specifically getting this element here. Yeah, any questions on the difference between class name and ID? Okay. So yeah, JavaScript is event driven. This is kind of a high level understanding of how JavaScript functions in general when attached to HTML and CSS. Events are actions that you can take as a user when you're using a website. So that's hovering, clicking, typing. There's a lot of different events that can happen. But generally, the concept is that an event is something that happens when you're using a website. So yeah, an example would be like on mouse over, which is like if I were to mouse over this text, it would have some CSS applied. On click should be fairly self-explanatory, and on key down is like when we press a key. Yeah. But yeah, with the DOM, we can change all of the elements on our screen. So yeah, because we have this representation of the whole HTML file as like as the DOM in JavaScript, we're able to change like literally anything we want on the page. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could make an entire HTML file in JavaScript and it would work perfectly fine. But yeah, so previously with pseudo selectors, we could only access the element that we select. So yeah, like the colon hover and colon active, those things only work on certain things that we apply it to. But in the event that sorry, when an event occurs, we have access to the entire tree and we can change anything on that event. But yeah. Every DOM element object has this on-click function. So anytime we want to set some interaction by clicking, we can just do it in JavaScript. So yeah, this is the function that will run when you click the element, creating an on-click event. So anytime I click on this specific element, we trigger an on-click event. Here's some example code of how that might work. We first get the element, which is our button element. And then we define this function called show greeting. And then we set the button element to have an on-click of show greeting. Yeah, can anyone just like very quickly explain what that would do? David.
Yeah, it does something when you click on it.
Yeah, perfect. So it's specifically for this button element. Whenever we click on this button element, we will have some event happen. In this case, show greeting. Yeah, so something to note here, in terms of syntax is that we don't want to call the function. We just want to pass in the function or pass the function into the on-click event. So yeah, we don't want to call it right then. We just want to tell the browser what it should use later on. Yeah, so show greeting can be called with different event handlers too. So say you want to do it on hover, you could do it with on mouse over. Yeah, we call the same function, but we don't do it on click, we do it on mouse hover in this case. And this can happen with any array of different events that happen. So yeah, we can also assign functions directly. This is kind of just more specific JavaScript syntax. But yeah, you can do this with anonymous functions. Not quite as important, but yeah, another thing you can do in JavaScript. So yeah, we have, now that we've kind of understood how we can use JavaScript to define our styles, we can do some things with it, notably alternative styling. So yeah, we don't have to add classes to modify our CSS, because we can just like affect a certain element on its events. So yeah, if we assign style.property to a specific string value, our CSS just reads the text, and we're able to use that string value to change the CSS property. So for example, if you want to change the color of the background of a certain button, you can change the background color to be whatever color you want. And that can happen on click, on mouse over, on key press down. There's lots of things you can do. But yeah, so the key here is that we have our change color function, which takes in a color, and we just set the color to the button's background. Yeah, can anyone tell me in this case what color our button would change and when it happens? Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's an on-click event, and then we have our function change color, which changes it to red. Perfect. Yeah, again, we can just do this like function anonymous function thing to kind of wrap it around. But yeah, not ultra important to remember. Yeah, so something that will be useful from now on is kind of the just Googling how do I change X property with JavaScript. Yeah, will be quite useful in the future. But yeah, any questions about the DOM and how we can use event handlers? It is kind of a very complex thing to think about, but yeah, if there's any questions, please let me know at any point. But yeah, into some more kind of like programming things. Yeah, we have these things called Boolean expressions, which is not as complicated as might sound. Basically, a conditional statement is something that allows you to do different things based on whether something is true or false. So if X is true, then we can do Y. I don't think it's ever really explained in the slides for some reason, but Boolean expressions are basically ways that we can evaluate true and false in code. A Boolean is just true or false. That's its definition. So yeah, we have an equality operator, which are the triple equals or the exclamation double equals. And this compares if two variables are the same type and the same value. There's some other ones as well, like less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. And these apply more specifically to like numbers. Yeah, going into more on the equality operator. So we can check some like simple algebra stuff if you wanted to. So you have 1 + 1 triple equals to 2. And this whole expression, as it's called, will give you true because 1 + 1 is 2. Similarly, 1 triple equals 2 evaluates to false, and 1 + 1, the exclamation point double equals, which means not equals, to 2 should evaluate to false, I believe. Yeah, should be false. That is kind of funny. But yeah, so that's kind of the equality part of things. There's also logic operators, which allows us to put together lots of these expressions. So we have our and the weird vertical line things and the exclamation point by itself. And these will do some different logic based on the values that it takes in. So let's look at an example of that. The and operator. So our and operator takes two separate Booleans, true or false, on either side of it, and it evaluates a new value. So true and false is false. False and false is also false, but true and true is true. So the only cases where and becomes true is when both of its input values are true, which is kind of complex when you say it, but it's a lot more intuitive than you might think. There's also or, which is kind of the opposite. Whenever one of them is true or both of them is true, then it becomes true. But if it's both false, it evaluates to false. And not is probably the simplest. Basically, it just takes the opposite of whatever it was before. So true becomes false and false becomes true. Any questions on logical operators? They're kind of confusing. All right. So yeah, what would this return? And we can break it down into steps. So first, what does 1 + 2 triple equal 3 return? Basically, does 1 + 2 equal 3? True or false? True. Okay, great. So we have true on the left side, and then we have our other expression, which is 5 times 6 equals 31. Is that true or false? False. True, guys. Good job. Good job. Okay. So now we have true and not false. So first, let's figure out what not false becomes. True or false? True. Any other votes? True. True. Okay, perfect. So yeah, it is true. So now we have true and true. What would true and true equal? True. Any other vote? Okay, true. Great. So yeah, we end up with true and not false, which evaluates to true and true, which is then true. Perfect. So yeah, this is something that we can use in what's called conditional statements, which allow us to make kind of complex decisions, and allows us to do special things with those decisions. To be a little bit more in depth, we have two different parts of a conditional statement, our if and our else. Let's go into what if is. So we take in a Boolean expression, which we just figured out earlier, if condition, and then it can do some specific thing. And it won't do those specific things when the condition is false. So yeah, a condition is an expression that evaluates the true and false, which we had practice with. And if it evaluates the true, then do everything inside the curly braces. So this is where we might use it in practice. So we have a function, number equal, and then if it's equal to a number, and we can do something if the number is equal to 5, and then do another thing if it's greater than 4. Does this example make sense to everyone, or should I explain more? Okay, I'm gonna trust that you guys understand this. But there's another way we can do this. So if our number is 5, then we do a certain thing, and then otherwise we do another thing. Does this make sense to people in terms of how we're using else? Okay, great. Um, so yeah, let's do a little experiment. What does number equal to 6 return here? Or I guess it doesn't return anything, but it says something. Yes. Perfect. And what if number equal of 5? Perfect. Okay, great. I think the idea is self-explanatory. Um, we can also do kind of more complicated else if statements. So yeah, we can add back that condition we had before. And what will this do if number is equal to 6? Yeah, perfect. Yes. So the flow that we're following here is that we check if number is equal to 5, which it's not. And then we check if the number is greater than 4, which it is. And so we print out number is greater than 4. Does everyone understand the 6 example here? Okay, what about number equals to 5? Does anything change from before? Okay, well, it doesn't change, but there is a case that we haven't explored yet, which is what happens if number is equal to 4? Perfect. Yes, so we go through everything and all of them are false. So then else just says we can just return or just do this last thing. So yeah, what if we had these numbers? Yeah, we can kind of understand what's happening here. If it's greater than 20, we do numbers greater than 20. If it's less than 10, we can put less than 10. And then otherwise, it's between a specific range of values. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, great. So yeah, don't do that. That's a lot and not necessary. So there is an operator in JavaScript called the modulo, which basically just returns the remainder of after a division. So in this case, we can return the remainder after dividing by 2, which tells us if a number is even or odd. So yeah, 5 divided by 2 has a remainder of 1, so it's odd. And 4 divided by 2 has a remainder of 0, which means that it's even. Does that make sense to everyone, how modulo is working? Okay. So yeah, this is a very simple way of writing if something or a function called is even, which tests if a number you pass in is even or not. So yeah, we have our number modulo 2 is equal to 1. And if that's true, then our number is odd. And otherwise, our number is even. Yeah. Does everyone kind of understand the idea behind true, false, Boolean expressions, and how we can use it for if and else statements? Cool. Any questions? No, okay. No worries. Okay, we'll move on to design. Oh no, I can't grab it.
Oh,
It's so small.
oh, wow, it's tiny.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Let me try. Okay. Hi, guys. Can you hear me in the back? Perfect. Okay, so hi, everyone. Today's design portion of the lecture is about accessibility. So accessibility, specifically in the scope of design, refers to creating products that can be used by a wide range of people. So this can include individuals who have disabilities. And in general, though, you want to design your product so that as many people as possible can use it. So generally, if you design for accessibility, it also makes it easier for everyone else to use. And often people overlook accessibility in their design because they're just trying to make products that look very visually appealing. But today we're going to go over why it's important to integrate accessibility. So how can we design for accessibility? We're going to do a quick thought experiment. So imagine the power goes out and you don't have your phone or any form of light in your house. What things would be the hardest to do without light? Does anyone have any ideas? You can raise your hand or shout it out. Okay, an example would be like cooking. It would be really hard to cook in the dark, especially like if you have to chop things, like it's very dangerous to use a knife in the dark. Does anyone else have any ideas? Oh yeah, typing would be really hard in the dark. That's true. Or like writing like on paper in the dark. Yeah, great ideas. Okay, one more thought experiment. So imagine instead that there's a divider that you can't see through that goes between you and your device. So what do you think would be the hardest things to do on your device if you can't see it? Any thoughts? Okay, also typing would be hard, like texting on your phone would be really hard. Or like, if you're trying to play a game, it would be really hard as well. So, basically the point of those two examples were to kind of put into perspective interactive experiences to kind of understand other people's experiences if they were, for instance, in these two examples, if they were visually impaired. So you can also imagine trying to do some of these interactive experiences to kind of put yourself in the shoes of other people to try to understand their experiences to help you design better products for them. So how can we incorporate this into web design specifically? So this is an example from Among Us. It's a really great example for contrast and symbols. So in the picture on the left, you can see right off the bat, you can see there's really great contrast from the back and the colors in the front. So they're using really saturated colors like red and pink, and they're making sure that you can differentiate them between the different colors. And also on the right, you can see in an update that they made, they also added shapes here, like little symbols here on the sides of each wire. So if you were, for instance, colorblind, you could rely on using the shapes instead of the colors. So this is another example from Dribble. This is kind of what an onboarding process would look like, or like a mailing list. But here it asks for your like name, your email, and a little message. And right off the bat, it looks like it has great, it has intuitive order. So it asks for your name first, and then everything else comes after that. However, something that I would personally change is usually the message is optional. And since it comes at the end, you could use these asterisks, like the little red asterisks you see, where it's like name is required, email is required, but the message is not required. And also something else that could be missing from this is example text. So for instance, like first name and then an example, a little bit grayed out would be like John Doe. And then you can see in this next example, this is kind of those like those suggestions in implementation. And you can see here, John Smith is the example text. You can see there's an example blurb here as well. And also you can see there's really great contrast. Like the pink is very bright, where the things that they want you to look at are like attach files is really important. And they also have this square outline, which shows you an affirmation like, oh, this looks good, like this will pass your screening. So another way to implement accessibility in your code specifically is using alt text. So here the alt text is Oski wearing a Santa hat on a football field. And you basically just put this in your image tag. And this would be really useful for people who maybe have visual impairments and they can't see this photo, but an accessibility tool they could use is like a screen reader, and then it would catch this text here and then it would read it out loud so they can visualize what Oski wearing a Santa hat on a football field would look like. So another thing is to use nav tags and main tags in HTML. So users who have physical disabilities often rely really heavily on using keyboard arrows. So usually that's like the arrow keys or the tab especially. So the way this would work is instead of scrolling with the mouse to get to the point on the page where you want to be at and click on things, you could use arrow tags to navigate like to different links or like hyperlinks on the page. So using nav and main tags would kind of just help structure the page into blocks so that it would be easier for them to navigate. And this is a more advanced concept, but you can always explore, like do your own research and explore how to do this online, because I think we won't be covering it in our curriculum. But yeah, those past few slides, we kind of emphasized that navigation is really, really important in creating accessible design. But we also want you to keep in mind that designing inclusively isn't just about disability. Something else we can keep in mind is like ethnicities, age, language barriers, or even like someone's familiarity with technology. Those all play a factor, and it's something that you can design accessibly around. So this is a great example. This is like an ethnic group thing. This is something that you would see at like the DMV. Like it asks you which of these best describe your ethnic group, and then there's a few like lists down here. Can anyone tell me what might be improved here? Okay, like personally, I think here, the first thing I'd see is that there's like 5 main like ethnic groups that they've listed here, and the other 2 options are other and like prefer not to say. And since there's only 5, you would either have to choose one of these or choose like one of these, and that's not too inclusive. So something that we can do to improve this a little bit is to create a drop-down selection. And that could be like alphabetized, and then you can have a little search bar there as well to get to your selection faster. And also, it looks like here that you can only like select one option. It might be a little more inclusive if you could select like multiple options as well. Okay, so some questions when you're trying to design inclusively, some things you should ask yourself are, who aren't we considering and who might we be excluding? Something else is, how easy is it for anyone to use our product? So these questions kind of just help you put into perspective if you're not meeting the needs of everyone, or if there's something that you can improve in your design. So just some general suggestions to improve your inclusivity in your design is to actively explore experiences that aren't similar to your own. This could be through talking to other people, just trying to understand like some insights that they might have that you can implement into your own designs. And something else, if you don't really want to interact with people, is to read reviews. Like some reviews online are really insightful. You can look at like product reviews maybe on like Amazon, and you can kind of just see like what people have to say about the product. And as general rules of thumb, you can, for web design specifically, you can focus on improving color contrast, symbols, making sure the text is big enough, and implementing maybe a translation option and using the tags that we talked about. Yeah, here are some great resources. The first one is Color Oracle. This is a Windows color blindness simulator. And then we also have WebAIM and Contrast, which checks your accessibility and contrast of your page. And also WebAIM has some articles and tools that you can look into for accessibility. And the last one is Axe Chrome extension, and you can test your accessibility violations if there are any on your page. And I think Figma has some really great plugins for accessibility as well. And yeah, that is the end of our design lecture. But does anyone have any questions? Okay, great. Okay, this is our attendance form. What is the secret word today? Gravy? Okay, gravy is the secret word. Gravy. Okay, thanks, guys.
I saw for the file, feel free to just like pop up to the button and I will check that out.